Hi, this is Dr. Jackie Taylor. We're going to look at Chapter 1, Getting Started, and talk about plans for documenting children's development. Today's agenda is to look at some of the reasons why teachers observe children and discuss a variety of observation methods and why they're useful. And we'll talk a little bit about the textbook and how to use it. And at the end, I'll tell you a little bit about how you're going to find information on how to register for MindTab and what you're going to do about exploring your Blackboard class and looking at a video for your electronic textbook and reviewing your syllabus. So we want to think about why we even observe children. The most important reason for watching children is to keep them safe. But we also are looking for other things. We want to see if there's a sign of sickness or disease. And then in the case of that, we want to observe and decide, and then we kind of act on that because we want to protect the physical health of others, especially nowadays with the coronavirus. We have to really think about, is a child ill, and do we need to isolate that child? So that the adult also observes for other reasons. The adult observes to discover the interest of a child, and that is a way of making the curriculum relevant to the child. The adult can adapt the teaching strategies to the child's styles and needs. The adult can help the child with tasks that are too hard for them. Sometimes we need to observe to know when a diaper needs to be changed, a shoe needs to be tied, a spill needs to be wiped up. All these are needs that we need to be responsive to, we need to take action for. Teaching is building bridges and making connections between new information and old. So we have to be based on topics that are relevant and that are of interest to the group. So through observations, teachers can identify when those teachable moments can happen and what is of interest to the child and what skills are about to happen. So if we are observing a child, then we know, hey, this is a time when we can teach that appropriate skill. So every child also deserves the individual attention of the teacher. Unfortunately, many children and families have come to expect to receive only bad reports and phone calls and notes from school, which bring that sense of dread. Uh-oh, there's a note from the teacher, or oh no, Mrs. So-and-so called. It's got to be bad news. So too often this communication they get is only when their child misbehaves or they're not doing well at school. So we need to be observing and finding those good things the children are doing. What are the things they are learning? So we could document from their portfolio some of that positive information that we could give about the child's progress and compare to their previous work, and not what other children are doing, but what that child is doing. Children are learning, and they're learning at their own pace. So we can give descriptive accounts of the child's behavior and skills from the point of view of their own achievement. You know, what they can do and what they have done, rather than what they cannot do. Sometimes a teacher sees a behavior or situation that needs intervention before it happens. Maybe you can tell a child is about to bite another child, so you can stop it, make a quick response, and prevent something from happening or escalating. Prevention is always better than remedy. Young children sometimes do go beyond the bounds of safety, and they have some unacceptable behavior. So redirection is better than discipline or punishment. So through observation, we can prevent those problems. Comparison over time can measure development in children. So in order to measure progress, teachers watch children to gather information. That is exactly what assessment is. The process of documenting a child's knowledge, skills, and attitudes in measurable terms. Sometimes teachers question or think maybe there's a red flag that might arise when you observe a child, certain behaviors or actions or skills, or maybe there's a lack of skills that can alert a teacher that maybe a closer look at a development area is necessary. A referral may need to be made or further evaluation in a specific area, such as a hearing or a speech problem or physical or cognitive development issue. By observing and recording, questions can be answered, and the teacher's own effectiveness can be measured also. Collecting high-quality data through reliable child assessment is one way to view the child and the program objectively. So assessment gives you quite a bit of information. There's so much that you can learn through assessment. Think about all the kinds of things that you do each day. Why do you write? What are some of the reasons that you write? Think about things that you write down. Do you write down to remember? One of the things that I write down is I keep a list of things I need to do at work so I don't forget. I'm kind of old-fashioned. I keep a calendar so I can remember people I need to meet with and events that I need to attend. I still keep a grocery list that's handwritten. I've been to the grocery store before and forgotten my list, and I try to remember everything that I needed to buy, and once I get there, I know that there's extra things and I just can't remember. So it is important to write down things. So when we think about observation, why do we write observation things down? And that's what we're going to talk about next. So obviously we need to remember. We need to remember we may have 15 children in a class, we may have 8. When I taught kindergarten, I had 31 one year, I had 32 one year. Quite a bit of children to remember everything about those children, and that was difficult for me to do. So it helps us to remember. We also need to compare a child's growth and development as he or she progresses. So 3 months ago, it's difficult to remember what a child was doing back then, but we want to see, how many letters could that child identify at that time, and how many letters can a child identify now. We want to see how far he's progressed. And then sometimes there's just not time to write down a whole incident that has happened, and you think it's really important to have that on file. So you write down a few little notes and you date it at the time, so it's just enough to jog your memory. And then later on you go back when there's time, they're napping or something, and you can write a longer narrative later, because all the details are quickly forgotten. So if you don't write all the notes, sometimes you can't recall all the details. So it is really important to write down and preserve all the details of exactly what happened. There's so much that happens during a day. Writing also is a model for children. And so when we do write, it shows children that writing is important. And then hopefully you don't have this happen in your class, but writing must be accurate to be used as evidence. If there happens to be child abuse, you need some documentation. It's very helpful to have that documentation written down. So why are there so many different types of observation methods? Why are we going to learn about so many different types of observation in this class? One thing that might help is think about it this way. Why are there so many ways to cook a chicken? think about if you had chicken every day. What if you grilled chicken every day and that's all you ever had? You never fixed chicken any other way. It'd get pretty dull, wouldn't it? If you just had grilled chicken. But think about all the recipes you have for chicken. Think about how many chicken casseroles you have, how many different types of chicken casserole you can make. Think about the different seasonings and the different parts that we can make for the chicken, how we can fry it, and we can bake it, and sometimes people just like the leg, or they just like the wing, or the different parts like that. But there's a lot of different ways to make the chicken, so think about it that way. So we have a lot of different types. We have some kind of narrative, which kind of tell a story, anecdotal records and running records and interviews, and they tell a lot of actions and words and results. We have criterion referenced recordings such as class list logs and checklists and rating scales, and they take a skill and they look for something, a standard, and they measure it. Quantitative recordings such as time samples and frequency counts provide a numerical count of an individual group or maybe even a group action, and then we can interpret in different ways. You lose a lot of the raw data, but you preserve some of the numerical information. You just don't get a lot of narrative for that type of recording. Children's work samples are things like the drawings that they make or the writings that they do, things that they make such as sculptures, but it could also be when you do a video recording of them or take a photograph of them or even an audio recording like this from this PowerPoint. Those can also be work samples, but they give a visual or audio account of the child's activities that you can keep, and it's a way to observe children in the natural setting of the classroom while they're participating. And that's really what we want to do no matter which type of observation method that we're going to use. We want to make sure it is while they are at play, while they're in their natural setting. That gives us the best indicator of their capabilities and what they can do. So each chapter of this textbook presents a different type of observation method. So each week we'll look at a different observation method, and along with it they review a developmental area. But what you need to understand is that observation method, is not limited to recording just that particular developmental area. They're just using that as an example. So they just happen to pair it up with that specific developmental area. So there's a lot of different methods that can be used for different areas of development, and they'll tell you that in the textbook too. But this is just a web that they've made, and they talk about, for example, at the bottom they have taken the work samples here, and they have added a lot of the different ones that we talked about, their writings and drawings and photographs and things like that. And then some of the quantitative methods that we talked about. And that when you say quantitative, you're thinking more of numbers, so frequency counts and time samples, and then the narrative, so think about that, it tells more of a story, and then the criterion reference. So they're just taking the ones and just pairing them off into the observation type method that it is. So why is it important to observe each child several times over the course of time using various methods? This is something that I want you to think about. I don't really want to answer this question for you. I want you to think about this question as you continue to read through this chapter and beyond. I hope that we can come back to this question and that it will be answered somehow. I mean, obviously, we were going to do this class in a hybrid method and be in the classrooms with the children, but we had to change the class due to COVID, so that was completely online. So we had to make a lot of changes, and we're not going to be observing actual children. We're going to be using a lot of videos. So there's a lot of changes we had to make, but why is it important to do multiple observations and do it over time and use different types of methods? Continue to think about that question. If you get a good answer, email it to me. We'll think about that, and I'll put your answer up if you get a really good answer. So why, when, and who? So let's think about these different people. You've got participant observers and you got non-participant observers. So when we think about a participant observer, this is a person who is working in the classroom and observing at the same time. That's basically what they're doing. So they're trying to observe, but at the same time they're monitoring children, they're doing things in the classroom. So that's a difficult thing to do. But that's what most teachers have to do at the same time. They are trying to, supervise the children at the same time observe. So a lot of times the teacher might need to see a child do something to see their development. So maybe they need to see a child climb, but the child never climbs on any of the pieces of equipment. So they may have to set up an obstacle course. And then in that obstacle course, the child has to climb. So maybe when you're in lab, sometimes you may have to set up an obstacle course or something, or maybe you have to bring a ball for the child to bounce it 3 times to see if they can do that skill or something. And that's maybe be the job of a student teacher. When you're in there, you maybe have to participate and help with the children, but you're trying to observe at the same time. A home visitor would be a person that would actually work in the home with a child and would be supervising the child, but would be observing the child at the same time. Non-participant observers. Now that's more enjoyable because you do not have any children you're responsible for. All you do is you're just in there observing. So it's nice. You can just come in and, if you're a student, you've probably done this some in 102 or 203 where you just have time to sit off to the side and out of the way, and you find a place where you just watch the children, and or you may have sit in an observation booth, maybe in guidance and classroom management or something, and or when you were in 203 and you got to go observe after school program or something, and you just kind of sat and watched where you weren't participating, you weren't supposed to be doing anything but just watching. A visiting teacher sometimes does that. Maybe she's evaluating the classroom, or maybe a teacher might be having trouble with a student or a child and ask for someone to come in and do some observations. So that happens sometimes. Family member might just stop by and want to see how their child's doing. They might just want to observe a little bit, or just observe in the classroom and see how the classroom's going, or maybe just come by and see, is this a school that I might want my child to go to? Or maybe either other professionals might come in just to get a feel of how the classrooms run, or to see if there's maybe an issue with a child, or to give some advice to help with a discipline problem or something like that. So if you were looking at this picture, what are some words or phrases that you would say to describe this child or describe this picture? What's happening here? What's going on? What are the words that you would say or use? Okay, if we were in the classroom, I would have given you a little bit more time to think about that. But what words came to your mind? Did you think of just the facts without bias or opinion? Were you objective or were you biased? Did you say he was sad? If so, you were biased. That is not a fact. You do not know for sure that the child is sad. You might think the child is sad, but you don't know that for sure. So that is not a fact. You can't write that down in observation. You don't know that. Did you say he's lost? You don't know that for a fact just by looking at the picture. All you know are facts, such as he is sitting. That's a fact. You know that part. He has his legs crossed. You know that. He's wearing a hat. He's wearing shoes. Those kind of things are facts. You can write those kind of things down. You can put down he is not smiling. Those kind of things. But you cannot make up things to say he's upset. He is sad. Those are your opinions. Those are things you are making up about the child. So be careful when you are looking at a child and you're doing observations and you're coming up with your own ideas. Those are not being objective. Those are just opinions and you're being biased. So when you're looking at videos and watching videos, make sure you're writing down just the facts about what you're seeing. So let's figure out how you were supposed to use this book. Every one of these chapters begins with the NACE professional preparation standard. So it kind of gives you some of the ideas about what is expected of you and how that aligns with some of the things in the chapter. It also gives you some of the program standards and the NACE guidelines and what's expected of programs and teachers. So those are all aligned at the beginning of the chapter, and you can see those. It kind of tells you which ones match up to what we're learning in each chapter. Also, the learning objectives are listed at the beginning of each chapter, and I've also put those in each of the week module areas, so you can click on those and see, and that's just to tell you what you're supposed to be learning that week. So that'll give you an idea if you want to know, like, hey, what are we supposed to be doing this week? What am I supposed to be learning? When you finish up all the work, this is what you're supposed to know by the time you get finished. So each chapter presents a different method of writing down or documenting what the observer sees or hears in the classroom or on the playground during regular activities or routines of the day. And the usage for each observation method are explained. So each week you have a different observation method in each chapter. And they'll give you examples, and they'll tell you all about the examples. They'll tell you what they're like, and they'll have advantages and the disadvantages of each one, and they'll give you suggestions of how to find time to use them if you're in a busy classroom. How to use the method. And then, like I said before, each of the chapter will have one domain or area of development for the child. And if you've taken Growth and Development 1 or Growth and Development 2, you'll understand that a little better of what we mean by that. So you'll know what to look for when you're observing. And then at times you will find in the textbook in your chapter some exercises, and those are just there to build connections with the content. You won't get graded on those, but sometimes it just gives you a little practice to kind of get some connection with the content. And not all the time, but sometimes the answers can be found at the end of the chapter, so it gives you a good idea how well you're applying the content and if you understand it. If we were doing this in class face-to-face, we would probably go over those. In the section that's called It Happened to Me, these are little vignettes, and these are about the author's classroom experience that happened. And these anecdotes talk about different child development episodes that the author has known and mistakes that the author made. Some of the observations are from the author's college students, and then others are stories that were told to the author. But all the stories are actually true. The topics and observation are just to make you think deeper about an issue. The features at the end of the chapter are things like helping professionals. This section is included in each chapter to acquaint the reader with types of specialists where the teacher might have to refer the family to. So it gives you a good idea of people you may need to meet with in your career, or you may have already met with if you are already working. Sharing with children and families. This feature gives you some ideas for talking about observations with the family or child. So when you do observations, that's not something you're always going to keep private. That's a lot of times you're going to be sharing those in conferences with families or even with the child. So it just gives you ideas for how do you talk to the child or family about those. Other methods. Each developmental domain can be observed and recorded using other methods. So they'll talk about what are some other observation methods that can be used with this domain that's in the chapter. Related readings, it gives you at the end of each chapter some helpful books and articles on different topics. So if you want to read about it further. And then the references that the author used to write the book at each chapter, she has those cited so that you can look up the information if you want to. So that's helpful. And then there are some notes you might want to know. The name of the book, Week by Week, the textbook. When the word teacher is used, it refers to the person who is the recorder that is documenting the child's behavior in the book. So the person who's doing the recording or the observations is the teacher, and when you see that used in the book. And they don't use the word parent. You don't think you're going to find that much in the book. Instead, they use family because some children aren't raised by the actual parent, maybe somebody else who's the primary caregiver for the child, so they just use the word family instead. In the chapter, you'll also see a lot of vocabulary words. Some you may know from other classes, some may be new to you, but their definitions will be in the margins of the pages. And then they're also in the glossary at the end of the book. But the words that they think may be new to you are in bold type, so they draw your attention. So that's really helpful because some of those may be in some of your quizzes or on tests. So that's helpful to you. The registering for MindTap, you might not have used MindTap before unless you used it in a different class. When you go into course content, it will tell you how to register for MindTap, and it is not that difficult. You will need a code. Each person has their own individual code, so you'll have to purchase your own code, but the directions are there at the top of the course content. So when you click on that, you'll have to register. Everybody has 2 weeks free. So you have 2 weeks to get your registration code. The Blackboard class, most of you who have had an online class before have taken the online class, so you should be able to know how to navigate the Blackboard class. So that shouldn't be a problem. I put up a video about how to use an electronic textbook because there are a lot of features on there that are really helpful to be able to search through and find things on the electronic textbook. It's really helpful. The video is actually for teachers, but I think I couldn't find one for students, so but it'll still be helpful. And then, as always, you need to review your syllabus and also review your course schedule to make sure you understand the due dates and things like that. That'll be helpful. And then, of course, contact me if you have questions.